Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to my channel or welcome back. I have a special coffee treat for you today. So my channel is called Coffee and Candles, but if you've been with me for a while, you know, by the way, this is a dog. You may see, here he is. I'm dog sitting for a friend and it's a she actually, and she's very upset at me right now because I'm not playing with her. So looks like she's gonna just sleep there in the sun. Hopefully that's okay. So I usually do candles for this channel. I would say like 98% of the channel so far has been candles, which I love, scented candles. But I love coffee, perhaps even more than candles. And my vision was truly to have a channel that was, I don't know, 40-60, you know, or I don't know if I intended for it to be 50-50. I am also a huge Starbucks girl. So most of the coffee reviews that I will be making are of Starbucks. Starbucks gets a really bad rap. I've heard a lot of people be like, Starbucks has shitty coffee. Starbucks coffee is burnt. It's bitter. It's this, it's that, you know? And then there's always the crowd that goes to the independent coffee store where the good coffee is. I personally think that Starbucks coffee is incredible and amazing, and they have a backlog of amazing coffee blends, coffee beans, etc. But most people don't know how to ask for it. They're not knowledgeable about what those blends are. And if you're not knowledgeable and if you're not empowered to ask, you will probably get what is the equivalent of house coffee or house wine, and that is the Pike's Place blend, which in my opinion is not particularly good. So this is the part of my channel that is a little educationally, because I really have a passion for educating people on like the backlog of amazing Starbucks coffee. And I've been teasing, but unfortunately the launch got delayed a little bit. But Starbucks, hopefully this year, is going to bring out for every coffee store an amazing electronic French press machine that is capable of giving you on demand a cup of coffee from up to 5 different coffee beans or blends. They're gonna be up on top, which means that at any point in the day, you will have much more options to be able to choose from if you are knowledgeable and ask what kind of beans do you have going right now, and then you'll be able to choose. But if you don't know anything about those blends, it's not gonna be very helpful for you. So I do review like specialty espresso drinks too, but I really want to start marching through all of the backlog of coffee beans and blends that Starbucks has on offer and that they brew from time to time in their stores, and hopefully in the future that you will be able to ask for on demand. So I'm going to start out with the first one, which may be brewing in your particular store right now, and that is the Verona blend. And you may have heard of that before. In my stores here in Charlottesville, they've been brewing, and this is a dark roast, by the way. So this is your dark roast option. The dark roast option has been Verona in most of the stores here in Charlottesville over the last 2 weeks. But I noticed this week they all switched over to Sumatra. And I knew I wanted to review Verona for you for Valentine's Day, which we're gonna get to in a second. I had to call around to like 4 stores in the area, and I'm like, what are you brewing for your dark roast? And finally I got one that was like, I think it's Verona. And I was like, I will be there. I need a cup of Verona. And when I got there, I'm like, no, this is for sure Verona, correct? You know, that kind of thing. He was a young man. He had no idea about like Verona at all. And then I started telling him like the story of Verona and like what went into it and what the beans were. And like he had no idea. And he's like a Starbucks barista. Of course, he was also only vaguely familiar with Romeo and Juliet. So take that with a grain of salt. But if like baristas sometimes don't even know what they're brewing, like all for to you, are all of you who are just consumers, perhaps even casual consumers who walk into a store and just kind of are at the mercy of whatever cup of coffee they shove across the counter at you. So we have Verona today, and I especially wanted to do this blend because it is the most quote unquote romantic blend. And yes, it is called Verona because it is supposed to be an association of Romeo and Juliet, which I thought was just perfect for Valentine's Day. So they called it Verona they rebranded it. Actually, Howard Schultz, who was the CEO of Starbucks and is probably the most famous CEO of Starbucks, he rebranded this blend as Verona in 1986. So Verona as a blend is 1986 old, but actually it was formulated originally in 1974. Okay, so here's what happened. In 1974, the Verona blend was commissioned. So many of you probably know that Starbucks was developed and created in Seattle at Pike's Place Market in Seattle, which is why their like house coffee is called Pike's Place. So there was a Seattle restaurant that was being created by a particular entrepreneur. And the name of the restaurant was going to be Jake O'Shaughnessy's. I think it was some sort of like Irish pub, but it was like a really like cool hipster one. I don't know. Anyway, he had envisioned on this menu an amazing Irish coffee, but he wanted he was fine like sourcing the Irish whiskey, but what he needed help with was coffee, and he wanted an amazing coffee. So he went to the amazing coffee makers in town, which is Starbucks, went to the owners and said, I would like for you to make me a unique blend for my restaurant, and I will pay for it. And I'm sure he offered a lot of money and was like, I could do. Apparently at this point in 1974, Starbucks didn't have any kind of business with restaurants. They did not sell like in bulk to anyone other than like themselves, their own location. And so like this guy had to really work with them for a long time. He was like, please create this. And finally, reluctantly, they agreed, but they're like, but we're not shipping it to your store. So we will make it. And then you have to come to Pike's Place like every morning and pick it up, because we're not a delivery service. That has since changed, obviously. Anyway, he was like, fine, I'll do it. So they created this blend and they called it Jake's Blend, and allowed Jake to put it on his menu for the Irish coffee and call it his Jake's Blend. And he would come every morning and pick it up. And the restaurant or the pub opened up in 1975, January. And actually I have a picture of, this was like the little flyer. Well, it's big because I printed it out really big. I'm gonna put it up on your screen right here. So this was actually what the little card looked like for the Irish coffee. It says classic Irish coffee. Jake's starts with 86 Irish whiskey from the Republic of Ireland. This is blended with Jake's deep roasted coffee from the Starbucks Coffee Company, pure cane sugar, and topped with a thin head of whipped heavy cream. And then weirdly it says at the bottom, Jake O'Shaughnessy sells more of its brand of Irish whiskey than any other drinking establishment in America, which is kind of a confusing line to me because like if it's their own brand of Irish whiskey, why would any other drinking establishment like sell it anyway? Another confusing thing for me is $1 for this classic Irish coffee. But then I remembered this is 1975. 1975, you could get an amazing like craft Irish coffee at Jake O'Shaughnessy's in Seattle for $1. $1. Friends, you can't get a Starbucks cup of coffee for $1 now. Inflation. Oh my gosh. All right. Anyway, this was the coffee blend. This was Jake's Blend. So let's talk about the coffee blend itself. And unless it's been reformulated, which I don't know behind the scenes, I'm going to talk about the original formula that was this coffee blend for a very long time. So this is Jake's Blend, which has now been obviously rebranded as Verona. And what they did was they made it 80% Yukon blend and 20% Italian blend. So it's an 80-20 kind of blend of two other blends that they already had in their catalog, Yukon and Italian. And Yukon and Italian should have their own videos, so I'm not gonna go into it like in really great detail. But Yukon for me is a little bit brighter and fuller, and it's a little bit more medium roast than it is dark roast. Italian roast is a true dark roast. I actually, between us, don't love Italian roast, and I'm even Italian, so I should love it so much. I really can't stand Italian roast, but Italian, many people love it though, and they do brew it quite a bit at Starbucks. It's a real popular dark roast. For me, it's very, very earthy, like earthy to the point where like I almost am tasting earth. A little dirty. And for me, it's also a little flat and extremely austere. There's hardly any sweetness in it. So probably the ratio is good there of the 80-20, because I think that the Italian roast is kind of giving it more of an austerity, and it's less sweet. It's more rugged of a coffee. And then the other 80% is like a very full and a little bit of a brighter, like mid-range kind of roast. Sometimes when a coffee gets light, it gets acidic, which I don't like very much. Most of your light roasts will be acidic, and acidic is a certain kind of brightness. For those of you who are candle people, this is kind of, often it is sweetened by something, or it's not sweetened. It's still a coffee bean, but it has almost like a citrus nuance to it. It's that kind of an acidity. It opens up, and on your tongue, it just has those like really forward, sharp, bright notes. Yeah? I personally don't love coffees that are up in that range, but a lot of people love that. When you see a bright coffee, usually it's because it has a little bit of acidity in it. For me personally, though, the Yukon blend is bright without it being truly acidic. Yeah? Okay. By the way, let me just open this up. Obviously they have Christmas cups that they need to get rid of. So here is, yeah. This is a very smooth coffee. Verona blend, which is Jake's blend, 80-20, Yukon Italian, is actually, I believe, one of their better sellers for dark roasts. And I can understand why. I think it's going to be a little bit more accessible for people who are not like true dark roast people, or who are a little bit wary of the dark roasts. Yeah. Like an entire cup of Italian roast, it's a lot. It's a lot. Verona though, because it's got the majority of the coffee is that Yukon blend, which I think maybe even be categorized as a dark roast, but it's really a very medium coffee. So you've really got a lighter dark roast, if that makes sense. And the Yukon is gorgeous. It is very, very full. It's a full. So rather than it being like a punch, which many dark roasts are, but I'm a dark roast girl too. There are good dark roasts that have a fullness too, and a very dark, like chocolatey element. I would say this one doesn't have a chocolatey element, but it's got a very round, full, smooth, medium kind of feel to it, with just a little tiny bit of almost spiciness. And because it's in the higher range for spiciness, like you can really taste it actually. Whereas when you get a spiciness in a very dark roast, sometimes you can't even it doesn't express itself quite as well because of how dark the roast is. Yeah. It's actually a really nice coffee blend, and I think a lot of people would really like it. There is something on the back end of it that I don't like. And then when I found out that it was 20% Italian roast, I'm like, that's the 20% I don't care for. It's also the 20% that is the darkest. So all things being equal, I would really like, I'm a dark roast kind of person, but man, that Italian roast is real off-putting. For me, it's just so dirty and flat. ooh, I don't love it, but I appreciate the fact that it is a really nice counterpoint and probably the right ratio to that Yukon blend, which really makes it gorgeous. So Starbucks is now promoting this as Verona blend, which we're gonna get to in a second. And the story on this is that it blends well with chocolate. And that's part of the reason I think that it was called Verona. Verona is the setting of Romeo and Juliet, if you don't know. And so I think that they are trying to brand it now as more of a romantic, like coffee and chocolate kind of blend. And I could see how this does blend very, very well with chocolate. If you had like an amazing chocolate cake, it has just enough of that like ruggedness with the Italian roast, so that it's not just mimicking the chocolate, but is providing like a really good foil for it. You've got the sweet, you've got the chocolate, and then you've got something that kind of stands up to it a little bit that is far less sweet, yeah? So I could see how that would too. And then also for those who are just having a cup of coffee with some dessert, with some chocolate, for instance, who are not necessarily just drinking as connoisseurs one coffee by itself, then I could understand why the Yukon would be a really great blend, because it's medium, it's not going to like steal the show from anything, but it's gonna provide that like warmth and fullness and even brightness that I think would pair really well. So if you've got chocolate, if you want a nice like pairing of chocolate to coffee, I would recommend this one, and Starbucks recommends it to you. And I could see also why, if you're a little bit wary of dark roasts, Verona would be a very good choice because so much of it is medium. So let me tell you, by the way, so Jake had his blend, right, which was actually for Irish coffee, not for chocolate, fine. People came to his restaurant and loved it so much that they started going to Pike's Place. They started going back to Starbucks and being like, we want Jake's blend. And Starbucks at first was like, well, go to Jake's restaurant then. But finally it became so popular that Starbucks just started selling it in their store. And they called it on the board 80-20. So it was like an 80-20 blend because it was 80% Yukon and 20% Italian. So people would come in and either ask for Jake's blend, or they would start asking for 80-20. Can I have the 80-20 blend? Yeah? And actually there's a story, somebody remembers it, that you could go in to get like a bag of beans, and they had packages that said Jake's blend on them, and they had packages that said 80-20. And so the employees were told, if a customer comes in and asks for Jake's blend, give them the Jake's blend package. But if they ask for 80-20, give them the 80-20 package. But it was like the same thing, basically, right? So for a real long time, it was 80-20. And then in 1986, Howard Schultz opened up, he like went to Italy and had a moment, and like he wanted Italian coffee bars and he wanted it to be more Italian. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, he like made his own like Italian coffee bar and got this 80-20 coffee that was on his list. And that's when he rebranded it as Verona. And I think he did so just because like Verona was Italian. So rather than call it 80-20, he was gonna like market it with his Italian coffee bar, right? So 80-20 became Verona, at least for Howard Schultz, in 1986. And then when he became the CEO of Starbucks, he just completely rebranded Jake's Blend / 80-20 as Verona. And that's the coffee that we now know as Verona, which is probably great for Valentine's Day. So their original packaging for Verona is this, actually. This is the label when they started to package the coffee as Verona. They used this label, and it's kind of supposed to like invoke Italian, you know, like Venice, something like that. You've got this romantic couple on a bridge. This picture was actually taken at Washington University, where they had a really nice brick bridge, and they just dated it to make it look older, with like an Italian like post stamp on it to make it seem like super cool in Italian. But actually, shout out, it was two legitimate people on a bridge in Washington University. And this was the label for a very long time for the Verona bag. Here's a picture though of the transition that has happened. So the original bridge version, and then kind of a more modern in-between version where the bridge was kind of there in a like kind of deconstructed way. And then now the new packaging, which does not have a bridge at all. Sad, but that is Verona. And I believe that's the package that currently is the case for Verona. I think that's the whole story. That's a crazy long story, right? It's a great coffee. Is it my favorite? No. It's not my favorite primarily because of that 20% of Italian roast that I really don't like. But it is nice. And I suspect, even though I don't like that 20% of Italian roast, I kind of suspect that if I just had the Yukon blend on its own, which is, I think, brewed very infrequently now, if it hasn't been discontinued, it would just, Yukon for me would just be too medium and not dark enough. And so while I like kind of hate the Italian roast of this coffee, at the same time, I appreciate and respect and honor the fact that it is contributing like a darker aspect to the coffee that I really do kind of want and crave in a dark roast. There you go, my friends. Call around, or when you're at Starbucks, ask them, what's your dark roast, you know? Maybe in your neck of the woods here on Valentine's Day, you have a store that is brewing Verona. What do they say? Cheers, cheers. You know, when they say like cups up or drinks up or something like that. Oh my gosh, I'm like losing my mind. Cheers to Romeo and Juliet. Cheers to you. Happy Valentine's Day. Get an amazing coffee. Have some chocolate cake. I love you all. Thank you for being here at my channel. If you're a candle person, I hope this was like kind of amusing, you know? Or maybe if you're a candle person, you didn't even watch this video. God bless. I will see you back in the next one for more candle content. Really good to see you guys. Have an amazing day. Catch you in the next one.